It's time to take a look at what's happening around Wyoming for Wednesday, April 9th. I'm Wendy Corr, bringing you headlines from the Cowboy State Daily newsroom, brought to you by Wyoming Community Gas. The choice gas selection period ends on Wednesday, April 23rd. This is your opportunity to select your natural gas provider for the coming year. For more information, visit wyomingcommunitygas.org. The UW Faculty Senate on Monday evening drafted a resolution of no confidence in UW President Ed Seidel's leadership following some departmental turnover and recent funding controversies and allegation that he falls short involving others in major decision-making. Cowboy State Daily's Claire McFarland reports that the UW Board of Trustees considered that statement and the concerns that prompted it during a lengthy executive session Tuesday morning.
The Board of Trustees descended into this 2-hour-long executive session to discuss personnel matters. And that's usually a harbinger, like, we're going to get out of the executive session and we're going to vote what to do with this person. That's generally how those go, right? Even though by law they're private. And so he was very nervous and gave a speech like, I am going to do better, including others in my decision-making in top decisions at this university. And he was looking just nervous. And then the executive session happened and everyone came out. The board chair said, we're going to make a committee to promote this concept of shared governance that the faculty have identified as a weak spot. And when that was going on, Seidel was hands clasped, looking grateful, looking emotional. And so I did confirm with the university spokesman, as of Tuesday, he is still the president.
Seidel promised publicly in Tuesday morning's board meeting to address faculty and leadership concerns. Wyoming's congressional delegation Tuesday basked in the glow of a White House ceremony where President Donald Trump signed 4 executive orders aimed at reversing a nearly decade-long decline of coal. It's potentially a watershed moment to boost the economy of the nation's #1 coal state, according to Cowboy State Daily's Sean Berry.
What these executive orders would do is be incredibly important to the coal industry. It's going to revitalize coal. The reason this is so important is, as most Wyomingites know, Wyoming is by far the nation's #1 coal producing state. No state is going to benefit from this more than Wyoming. These orders to help the coal industry by, for example, removing the moratorium on federal leases. Coal companies, like other energy companies, lease federal lands. Well, there was a moratorium on that. This scraps the moratorium. It does other things. It looks to keep coal-fired electricity plants up and continuing to run, even though many of them were scheduled to be retired. But the most memorable moment for sure was when Trump singled out the 2 U.S. senators and Rep. Harriet Hageman as well.
The nation's 2 largest coal mines by far are in Wyoming's Powder River Basin, which extends north into Montana. An anguished father stood in a Natrona County District Court on Tuesday asking for the maximum sentence possible for the 16-year-old boy who killed his daughter, shooting her at point-blank range in a Southside park last May. Evan Castaner pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the death of his former girlfriend, Linnea Brown, in a deal with prosecutors. At the end of Tuesday's 2-hour sentencing hearing, Judge Daniel Forgy sentenced Castaner to 42 to 75 years in prison, a move that concerned the defendant's attorney, according to Cowboy State Daily's Dale Killingbeck.
His attorney, Ryan Summerad, is appealing that decision. He's arguing that on a second-degree murder charge, which he pled to, which he agreed to in a plea deal, that it's not only unconstitutional, but it's illegal because he's a juvenile, and it would put him in a place where it would be technically a life sentence because he's as young as he is, 16 years old right now.
Brown's father told the packed courtroom that the death of his daughter at age 17 at Castaner's hands changed his family's lives forever. Legal gaming has grown in leaps and bounds in Wyoming over the past few years, and the Wyoming legislature hasn't added much oversight on the $2 billion per year industry. Cowboy State Daily's Leah Wolfson reports that the legislature's Management Council created a new committee Tuesday that will be directed to get better control on legal gaming in Wyoming.
I spoke to Senator John Kolb, a Republican from Rock Springs, who was one of the people who spoke in favor of this proposal, and he just believes that gaming in Wyoming needs a lot lot more regulation and control, and that the horse has kind of gotten out of the stall, so to speak. So what this select committee will do is look at issues related to gaming and just try to learn a lot more about how it works. Senator Tim Salazar said that he believes there's kind of a sentiment in the legislature that a lot of people don't understand how it works, so they don't even want to deal with it.
The gaming industry in Wyoming is overseen by a citizen commission and staffed department, but only the legislature can create new laws to rein in the industry. House Bill 85 was brought during this year's legislative session and would have addressed these issues, but it died before passing into law. And now let's take a look at today's weather with Cowboy State Daily meteorologist Don Day.
Well, after a few showers across northern Wyoming and some windy, mild conditions elsewhere, this Wednesday will be a little cooler. Temperatures still are going to be not bad, 50s and lower 60s, which is actually very close to average for this time of year. But I'm afraid to say still expect it to be very windy, especially along I-80 and I-25. A few showers may linger early today in the northeastern part of the state. Otherwise, we're going to go through today's wind and cooler temperatures and go into a couple of beautiful days, Thursday and Friday. Not as much wind, sunshine, warmer temperatures, and Thursday and Friday will likely be dry statewide. We'll carry some of that mild weather into the start of Saturday, but late Saturday and the Sunday, a cold front will arrive, bringing a change in our weather by the weekend. And we'll have more for you on that tomorrow.
You can get Don's full forecast on the Cowboy State Daily website. I'll be back in just 15 seconds with more news.
We're a company seeking to develop a rare earth element mine outside of Wheatland, Wyoming. Rare earth elements are magnet metals, an important industrial input in everything from your cell phone to an F-35 fighter jet. We're trying to bring a domestic supply online so that our country doesn't have to rely on China. Please visit our website at AmericanRareEarths.com.
Colossal Biosciences, the company whose goal is to genetically resurrect the woolly mammoth by 2028, rocked the world Monday by unveiling the return of a long-extinct species, the dire wolf. Romulus and Remus, two white-haired pups, were born in October 2024 with the genetics from dire wolves that lived 11,500 and 72,000 years ago. But Cowboy State Daily's Andrew Rossi reports that the depth of this achievement is more nuanced than the two happy, healthy, white-haired wolf pups.
What they did was they analyzed the complete genome of dire wolves, which went extinct 10,000 years ago. They found 14 to 20 unique genetic signifiers that showed how dire wolves were different from modern-day gray wolves. And then they just did some tampering so that these two wolf pups named Romulus and Remus were born with the genetic characteristics of dire wolves rather than gray wolves. So that should mean that they should be slightly larger, have stronger and bigger teeth in some respects, and they have white coats, which took one of the scientists I spoke to by surprise. Wyoming didn't contribute to the resurrection of dire wolves in this case, but they have been part of that discussion.
In the meantime, ongoing research at Natural Trap Cave in Wyoming's Bighorn Basin and the famous La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, California, is trying to answer questions about the prehistoric world that left dire wolves and other prehistoric species behind. When a 16-year-old Glen Rock High School student approached Wyoming lawmakers Tuesday at the state capitol to ask for harsher penalties for adults who stalk minors, state leaders agreed to look into it. The teenager was Jillian Holman, who was the victim of a 41-year-old woman who was sentenced last month for impersonating and bullying the girl and another teen. Cowboy State Daily's Claire McFarland reports that the Management Council, which is the Wyoming legislature's administrative arm, met Tuesday to consider whether the Judiciary Committee should research ways to bolster Wyoming's stalking laws.
She went up by herself and she talked about what she had gone through and her hopes for the new legislation. Several lawmakers commented on her courage and said that they wanted to support her, that they wanted to help her. Her main point was what the victims in this case perceive as a weak point in Wyoming law, where a grown-up stalking a minor faces a misdemeanor unless there's something like an injury or a protective order already in place. They just face a misdemeanor. And so she was saying, we should have something harsher when adults stalk children.
Marcy Smith stalked Jillian and Jillian's boyfriend, Preston Sorensen, for nearly a year. Smith was sentenced to 2 years probation last month and fined less than $1,400. Well, it's a crime ring with a name that has a do-gooder ring to it, Operation Homeless. What sounds like an initiative to help the growing number of people in Montana with no place to live is actually part of a multi-state criminal operation preying on homeless individuals. And Cowboy State Daily's David Madison reports that one of the people responsible for this crime spree in multiple states, including Montana and Wyoming, was sentenced to nearly 5 years in prison on Monday.
We've heard all about cyber fraud. We've heard about the predatory phone calls on our seniors. Now comes a new category of fraud that really stoops to some low levels. That's according to the very stern language voiced in the charges against two men from Georgia who preyed on the unhoused, on homeless men specifically, and would recruit them, dress them up to appear as though they were coming from a specific job, and then have them cash a counterfeit check that matched the outfit somehow. They had the technology, the printers, the graphic arts skills, somehow the intel on those numbers, those account numbers and those names to create really believable phony paychecks. And they got away with it until the banks flagged them.
Stanford Lightfoot, a 33-year-old from Atlanta, Georgia, pleaded guilty to bank fraud and aggravated identity theft. He was sentenced Monday to 57 months in prison and ordered to pay over $160,000 in restitution. Decorah Smith, Lightfoot's co-defendant, pleaded guilty to similar charges. And on March 21st, 1962, a 2-year-old black bear named Yogi had a rough day. He was ejected from a supersonic bomber at an altitude of 35,000 feet, supposedly to test the effectiveness of the bomber's escape system for human flight crews. According to accounts of the test, Yogi landed safely and apparently unharmed 7 minutes and 49 seconds after he was ejected. But Cowboy State Daily's Mark Hines reports that despite surviving that adventure, poor Yogi's fate was still sealed.
They wanted to test, I guess, the viability of the ejection system. It was an actual pod that the pilot or crew members would eject out of. But instead of risk a human the first time around, they used a bear. Yogi was a 2-year-old black bear. They put him in there and ejected him. I think they were at 35,000 feet going around 870 miles per hour when they ejected poor Yogi. And he survived the ordeal. Unfortunately, a short while later, they put him down so they could do examination of his internal organs to see what sort of damage had occurred.
One retired Wyoming ecologist pointed out that it's likely that Yogi endured his ejection ordeal and later died for no reason, because using a bear to test human survivability under extreme conditions just doesn't make sense. Other than the fact that humans and bears are both mammals, the physiology and anatomy are very different. And that's today's news. Get your free digital subscription to Wyoming's only statewide newspaper by hitting the daily newsletter button on cowboystatedaily.com. And you can watch this newscast every day by clicking subscribe on our YouTube channel, or you can listen to us on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Wendy Corr for Cowboy State Daily.